My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the invisible one in my family. Not the rebel, not the failure, just the one who never quite lived up to the Bennett standard. My father is a retired surgeon. My mother, Linda Bennett, is a celebrated figure in the city's philanthropic circles, president of the prestigious Women for Progress Foundation. My older brother, Jeremy, is a high-profile litigation attorney. Then there's me, or as my mother once said, the girl who dabbled in media because she couldn't handle a real profession. I never fought it. I let them think I was figuring things out, bouncing between projects, building a so-called creative agency that to them sounded like a side hustle at best. Truth was, I was building something bigger than any of them could imagine. But I didn't need them to know. Not yet. That call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was reviewing final campaign assets for a national nonprofit launch when my assistant buzzed in. Claire, there's a call from someone at the Women for Progress Gala committee. I nearly declined. Then I remembered. The annual charity gala was in 3 weeks, and I'd pledged $60,000 to support it, quietly through one of the foundations I fund. I picked up. This is Claire. A hesitant voice spoke. Hi, Miss Bennett. This is Deirdre from the Gala organizing team. I was asked to reach out on behalf of Mrs. Linda Bennett. I straightened slightly. Go on, there's been a change to the guest list. Your name has been removed from the seating plan and event communications. I blinked. Removed? Why, she cleared her throat. Mrs. Bennett felt it was more appropriate to feature contributors who aligned better with the image of the organization. I see. Also, she said that your donation would still be accepted and already allocated. The pause on the line stretched long. I watched rain slide down the office windows of my downtown penthouse suite, one of the perks of running a PR and media group that had tripled in revenue each year since its founding. So just to clarify, I said slowly, I'm no longer welcome at the gala, but you're keeping the $60,000 I donated a beat. Yes, ma'am. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you for letting me know, Deirdre. I'll need to make a few calls, starting with the venue. Because what my mother didn't know, what no one on that committee knew, was that the ballroom she booked, the one with the chandelier press release she was so proud of, it belonged to me. Or, more precisely, to my portfolio. This was about to get interesting. I wasn't always the person who could cancel a six-figure gala with a single phone call. 5 years ago, I was just Claire, the family afterthought with a journalism degree, a failed startup behind me, and a resume. My brother once joked looked like a Pinterest board of hobbies. But I've always believed that being underestimated is a secret weapon. While they were watching, I learned to move quietly. After graduating from a small liberal arts college, I took a job writing blog copy for a wellness brand. It was tedious, underpaid work, but I learned how audiences think, how brands grow, and how messages move people. 2 years later, I quit to start my own digital media consultancy. No one in my family even blinked. My mother told her friends I was freelancing to find myself. What I was actually doing was studying market gaps, how nonprofits struggled to modernize their outreach, how traditional PR firms were missing the emotional core of storytelling. I built Bennett Creative Group from my apartment living room with a secondhand laptop and a prepaid phone. For the first 18 months, I didn't take a salary. I built websites, wrote speeches, coached founders, and pitched storylines for campaigns that no one else believed in. My family never asked what I did, but they'd smile politely when I mentioned a new project, and then pivot the conversation back to Jeremy's court victories or my mother's latest gala committee role. I didn't mind, not really. It gave me space to build. By year 3, I had 9 full-time employees, a growing client list of nonprofits and socially conscious brands, and enough cash flow to invest in real estate. I didn't buy flashy properties. I looked for opportunity. A struggling event venue in the arts district, a boutique floral design company in bankruptcy, a print shop with distribution issues. I bought them all through holding companies, restructured the businesses, and funneled clients through my agency network. By year 4, I owned the logistics pipeline for half the city's high-profile charity events, and nobody knew, because I never attached my name to any of it. Not publicly. That wasn't the point. I didn't need headlines. I wanted infrastructure. My biggest acquisition came 6 months ago, a partnership stake in Frontline Foundation, a quiet but powerful philanthropic fund that backs women-led initiatives across the country. Through Frontline, I donated to causes I believed in, including my mother's Women for Progress Foundation. She never knew it was me. That was intentional. I wanted to support the mission, not claim credit. But when I heard that the annual gala was struggling to meet its funding goal, I stepped in. An anonymous donation routed through Frontline with clear instructions covered the cost of the venue audio floral and the VIP reception. A $60,000 package. It wasn't pocket change, but for me, it was worth it. Or it had been. Until today. Until I found out my mother had chosen to remove my name from the guest list entirely, while still planning to toast our generous donors. It wasn't just exclusion. It was erasure. It wasn't the first time either. I'd been edited out of family newsletters cropped from photos skipped over in introductions. Jeremy once introduced me as his creative sister, who's always up to something quirky. When I landed a national campaign with a human rights organization last year, my mother told a friend Claire helped with their social media. Helped. As if I hadn't led the entire rebrand orchestrated press coverage in 3 languages and doubled their fundraising in 1 quarter. I had spent the last 5 years becoming someone they wouldn't recognize, and now they wouldn't have a choice. Because the moment they tried to erase me publicly, they gave me a reason to step into the spotlight not for revenge, but for clarity. They needed to see who I was now, not through press releases or Instagram filters, but through consequence. The kind that starts with a polite phone call and ends with an entire event unraveling, quietly, elegantly, on my terms. The moment I hung up the phone, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Years ago, being removed from something my mother was proud of might have left me devastated. Now I saw it as data, confirmation, proof that no matter how far I'd come, they still saw me as a liability. A footnote, an inconvenience that could be trimmed from the guest list without consequence. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care, that I'd still write checks from the shadows and accept being ignored. They were wrong. The first call I made was to my director of operations. I asked her to send me a breakdown of every vendor affiliated with the Women for Progress Gala. The list wasn't long: Crystal Ballroom, Atelier Flora for arrangements, Elevate Catering, Full Frame Media for live coverage. Every single one of them was either partially or fully owned by companies within my network. That had been strategic, of course. Over the past 5 years, I'd quietly positioned my businesses as the backbone of nonprofit events across the city. If someone wanted a venue food design press or promotion, odds were they'd end up working with me even if they didn't know it. My mother didn't. Until now. I didn't issue threats, I didn't send dramatic emails. I simply made a few calls, spoke to my managing directors, pulled the contracts, reviewed the clauses. There was nothing rushed or reactive about it. The contracts were standard. And the cancellation terms were very clear. Any client found to be in breach of ethics, including discriminatory behavior or deliberate misrepresentation, would be subject to immediate termination of services. That applied to individuals' events, or in this case, entire foundations. I requested that all services linked to the Women for Progress Gala be paused immediately. No public statements, no explanations, just a quiet internal note. This client is no longer aligned with our partnership criteria. Next, I contacted Frontline Foundation. Technically, I was just a major stakeholder, but my influence was enough. I had the 60,000 flagged for potential clawback due to organizational misrepresentation. When asked for reasoning, I submitted the Gala program, where my name had been entirely omitted along with any mention of the anonymous donor. The fact that I was both the donor and the person funding most of the event through my business portfolio made the situation a clear conflict. Frontline agreed. The donation would be paused pending review. The foundation's name would also be removed from promotional materials. By lunchtime, I'd effectively dismantled the entire event without raising my voice or breaking a sweat. The irony, it wasn't personal, at least not entirely. I wasn't trying to punish my mother. I wasn't out to embarrass my family. But they had created a public platform designed to celebrate visionary women while deliberately excluding their own daughter from the table. That wasn't just insulting. It was hypocritical, and I couldn't let it stand. Not anymore. Around 3 p.m., I received the first text from my brother Jeremy. Claire, mom's losing her mind. What did you do? I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, another message. She says you sabotaged the gala. Is that true? Still no reply. Then came the email. Official formal from the Women for Progress Gala Committee. Dear Ms. Bennett, we've encountered an unexpected disruption with several of our key vendors and we're hoping you might assist us in identifying alternative providers on short notice. I laughed out loud. The same woman who had me erased from her guest list was now scrambling to find help from the very person she had ghosted. But I didn't respond. Not yet. This wasn't about retaliation. It was about recalibration. I wanted them to sit in the chaos they created, to realize that the daughter they had dismissed had been holding up more than they ever knew. Not for ego, not for recognition, but because I believed in the mission. I had always believed, even when they didn't believe in me. That night, I reviewed the original event proposal I'd submitted through Frontline. It had been detailed, elegant, efficient. It was going to be one of the most beautiful galas the foundation had ever hosted. Now it was a void, a question mark. And unless they were willing to rethink everything, including how they treated the people closest to them, it would remain that way. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion, but I was done letting them take my money, my work, and my silence and pretend I didn't exist. It was time they saw me. All of me. By Wednesday morning, the calls began to multiply, first from the venue, then the catering manager, then the florist, each one letting me know that someone from the gala committee had reached out in a panic. Apparently, no one had been informed the event was being canceled, because technically it hadn't been, not by any single announcement. But as each vendor quietly withdrew, the reality became harder to deny. No venue, no food, no floral, no live media, no event. My mother must have assumed she could just replace the vendors. But high-end gala services aren't something you swap out like party favors. Not 3 weeks before a major event. Not when your name is already being flagged by back-channel networks is difficult to work with. That was the second layer of my business most people never saw. The relationships, the trust, the reputation. You can't buy that in a rush. You build it over years. You earn it every day. At noon, I took a call from Margot, my COO. She was trying not to laugh. Claire, I just got a call from Deirdre. She asked if we had any leads on replacement vendors. I told her we'd check our availability and get back to her. I smiled. Good. Let them wait. That same hour, Frontline Foundation issued a formal letter to the Women for Progress Board. It read, due to discrepancies in donor representation and ethical concerns regarding exclusionary practices, we are suspending our partnership for the upcoming gala and withdrawing all current funding commitments. It was signed by the executive director, but I'd written the language myself. It was clean, clinical, and impossible to refute. My phone rang again around 1:30 p.m. This time it was Jeremy. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Claire, he said, his voice sharp. What is going on? Good afternoon to you too, I replied calmly. Don't play coy. The vendors are pulling out. The press is canceling. Mom's been crying since last night. That's unfortunate, I said. Maybe someone should have considered the full implications of erasing the person underwriting the entire event. We didn't know it was you, he said a little too quickly. You hit it. No, I said. I just didn't put my name on it. There's a difference between hiding and letting your actions speak louder. You're punishing her, he accused. You're punishing all of us. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. But I am holding people accountable. You can't ask for my support and then pretend I don't exist. You can't build platforms celebrating women's leadership while systematically excluding your own daughter from the narrative. He didn't respond right away. I continued. Did you know the venue was mine? Crystal Ballroom was bought last year by one of my holdings. I approved the leasing contracts. The catering team I acquired Elevate 6 months ago. The PR firm handling promotion, also mine. Through Bennett Creative. Even the program design and ticketing system, they all run through my ecosystem. You didn't just exclude me from the guest list. You tried to throw a party in my house using my services funded by my money and acted like I wasn't even invited. Silence. Then a quiet, stunned Jesus. No, I said. Just Claire. By 3 p.m., my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 3:05, then again at 3:12. By 3:30, I received a long email from the foundation board chair requesting an urgent meeting to restructure the event and salvage what we can. I agreed to meet, but only under my conditions. The meeting would happen at Bennett Creative Headquarters in our main conference room. No committee entourages, just the core family and the board chair. That evening, I finalized the terms. If they wanted the event to proceed, they'd need to do 3 things. First, issue a public acknowledgement that the anonymous donor had been misrepresented and offer an apology. Second, reinstate my name on all guest lists and marketing materials, not out of obligation, but because I was in fact the largest contributor and strategic partner. Third, agree to scale the gala to a smaller format fitting the reduced timeline and vendor capacity. I wouldn't do them the favor of scrambling to recreate the original spectacle. They'd get something intimate, elegant, and appropriate for the actual support they now had. Not the illusion they were selling. By morning, I received their response. They agreed. Not happily, but clearly. The board didn't want the PR disaster. My mother didn't want the shame. And my brother, well, he had finally realized that the creative sister he once teased was now the architect of their entire event reality. The next 48 hours moved fast. The gala was relocated to the Marlowe Gallery, an art space I'd recently helped renovate and partially sponsor. Seating was reduced to 80 guests. The floral design was simplified. The catering shifted to a refined small plate format. We brought in a house quartet instead of a full orchestra. But the real change wasn't aesthetic, it was narrative. For the first time in 5 years, my name appeared on a foundation program as a lead sponsor. Not because I asked, because it was impossible to ignore. The new invitation read, "With gratitude to Claire Bennett for her unwavering vision, quiet generosity, and the infrastructure that made this evening possible." That wasn't my wording. I would have gone simpler, but I let it stand, because for once, they finally got it. The morning of the rescheduled gala arrived with a kind of eerie calm. The Marlowe Gallery looked stunning. Minimalist, understated, drenched in golden light from its wall-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't crystal ballroom opulence, but it didn't need to be. This wasn't a night about grandeur. It was about clarity, precision, and consequence. I arrived early, not to oversee final preparations, my team had that covered, but to stand in the silence for a moment and breathe. There was something poetic about it. The same woman who had once been called a freelancer finding herself was now the unseen curator of an entire city's philanthropic machinery. At 5:17 p.m., the first guests began to arrive. By 5:45, the room was nearly full. 80 hand-picked attendees, most of whom had received last-minute changes to their invitations with minimal explanation. The speeches were short, polished, predictable, until the foundation chair took the microphone. Before we move into our formal program, she began. I'd like to acknowledge someone whose quiet leadership has guided not just this evening, but countless events over the past several years. Claire Bennett, your vision, your infrastructure, your unshakable professionalism. These are the reasons we are gathered here tonight. We apologize for the oversight in not recognizing your contributions sooner. She turned toward me, eyes steady. You are not just a guest. You are the foundation. A hush spread through the room as all eyes turned toward me. I stood slowly, not to take a bow, just to be seen. My mother sat 2 rows in front of me, her posture stiff, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Jeremy sat beside her, his expression unreadable. Later, after the formalities, I stood at the bar sipping seltzer when my mother approached. Claire, she said, her voice thin. May I speak with you for a moment? I turned slowly. Of course. We moved to a quiet corner of the gallery near a sculpture I had donated under a different name. She didn't look at me right away. I didn't know about all of this. About you. That's because you never asked, I said gently. You never wanted to know? She flinched slightly. I thought you were figuring things out. I didn't think you were building an empire. I smiled not unkindly. You didn't need to think that. You just needed to treat me like I mattered. Empire or not. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said. And not just with the guest list. For years I've been invisible to you unless I fit the narrative you wanted. And when I didn't, you pretended I wasn't there. A pause. Then she said, I'm sorry, Claire. Truly. I nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. You still came tonight. After everything. Of course I did, I said. Because the work matters. And because I wanted you to see, not out of pride, out of truth. She looked at me, then really looked. You're extraordinary. I always was, I said softly. You just didn't want to see it. Jeremy approached us a few minutes later. Hey, he said. You win. I tilted my head. It wasn't a competition. Still, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's impressive. All of it. I should have asked more questions. Paid more attention. Yeah, I said. You should have. We stood in silence for a beat. Mom's gonna need time, he added. She's not used to being outmaneuvered. Neither were you, I replied. He laughed dryly. Touché. The gala wrapped around 9:30. No press photos were released. No grand exit. Just quiet conversations, soft music, and guests who left understanding that the person behind the scenes had been in control all along. As I slipped out through the back entrance, my heels clicking softly on the gallery's marble floor, I felt no anger, no resentment, just a calm, resolute satisfaction. They had finally seen me, not as the daughter they couldn't categorize or the sibling they pitied, but as the force I had become. And now that they'd seen it, they couldn't unsee it. The following Monday, I received a formal letter from the board of the Women for Progress Foundation. It was brief but meaningful. Acknowledgement of my donation, apology for the miscommunication, an invitation to join the advisory board. I didn't respond right away. Not because I needed time to think, but because silence, I'd learned, was a powerful communicator. Let them sit with the uncertainty for a while, just like I had. Let them wonder whether they'd finally lost access to the most consistent contributor they'd ever had. Later that afternoon, my mother called. I answered. Claire, she said carefully, the board wants to make things right. So do I replied. But it can't be a one-way street. She exhaled. Tell me what that means. It means I said that if you want my continued support, financial or otherwise, there need to be terms. Clear ones. All right, she said. I'm listening. First, I said my presence is not optional. At any future event I support. I'm not to be hidden, erased, or treated as an afterthought. I don't need to be on stage, but I won't be disrespected. Second, you acknowledge publicly what happened. You don't have to name me, but the foundation must address the mistake. A brief statement about inclusivity and transparency will suffice. Third, we stop pretending this was all a misunderstanding. You didn't just forget to include me. You chose not to. And now you choose differently, or you don't get to choose me at all. There was a long silence on the line. I didn't rush to fill it. Finally, she said, Those are fair terms. I blinked. You think so? I do. I may not have seen it before, Claire, but I see it now. You've built something incredible. And I'm sorry it took public embarrassment for me to recognize that. Thank you, I said evenly. But this isn't about my success. It's about how we treat people when we think no one's watching. It's about respect. I understand, she said. Then we're aligned, I said. Because if the foundation wants my continued involvement, I need it to reflect the values it claims to uphold, not just for me. For every woman who gets overlooked because she doesn't fit the mold. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She simply said, understood. 2 days later, the foundation released a carefully worded statement on their social media. As we reflect on recent challenges surrounding our annual gala, we acknowledge the need for greater transparency, respect, and inclusion in every facet of our work. We are committed to growth, to listening more deeply, and to honoring every contributor's voice. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't specific, but it was public. And for me, that was enough. I wasn't interested in dragging names through the mud. I just wanted the rules of engagement to be clear going forward. My brother emailed me separately. I read the statement. I know it came from you. You were right. I was blind. Next time I'll pay more attention. I promise. I responded simply, start by asking better questions. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my office surrounded by light soft jazz playing from a corner speaker when my assistant knocked and said my mother was in the lobby. Unannounced. No warning. I considered making her wait just long enough to remember the dozens of times I'd waited for her approval. But I didn't. "Send her in," I said. She walked in wearing one of her signature pastel suits, clutching a tote bag that was far too casual for her usual demeanor. "I brought lunch," she said. "Figured I owed you one." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a first." She smiled faintly. "I know." We sat in the small conference room overlooking the city skyline. As we unpacked the food, Mediterranean wraps, a quinoa salad, sparkling water. She looked around at the sleek shelves, the framed awards, the team moving silently in the open concept workspace. "You've built a kingdom," she said. "I built an infrastructure," I corrected. "Kingdoms require heirs. This requires commitment." She nodded. "Jeremy told me he visited your website. He didn't understand half of it." "That's because most people don't read the fine print," I said. "They see a social media campaign and assume that's all we do. They don't see the grant structuring, the funding strategy, the policy shaping. That's where the real work happens." She looked at me thoughtfully. "I wish I'd asked sooner. I wish I'd looked closer." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "It would have mattered more before. But I appreciate that you're looking now." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. "The board has approved your addition to the advisory council. They also want your input on a new mentorship program. Young Women in Communications. Something to reflect the world you've built." I scanned the documents. They were thorough, respectful, without ego. "It's a good start," I said. "But I want more than a token seat. I want operational involvement. I want strategy, not photo ops." "Agreed," she said. "You'll lead it. Your way." That more than any public acknowledgement was the real shift. Not just her saying yes, but her stepping aside. By the end of the lunch, we'd set the terms. I wasn't just an invited guest anymore. I was a decision maker, a collaborator, a force in the room. And that felt right. That evening, as I walked home through the city, the air was thick with the hum of late spring. A street musician played something soulful on the corner. I paused for a moment, letting it wash over me. This was what growth felt like. Not applause, not trophies, just a quiet confidence that you had finally come into full view, not by shouting, but by standing. Not by demanding respect, but by embodying it so completely that it became impossible to ignore. A month after the gala, I received an invitation to another event. This one wasn't from my mother. It was from a young nonprofit founder I had mentored years ago. She was launching her first full-scale campaign, and she'd listed me as her keynote speaker. At the bottom of the invitation in bold serif font, it read, "Claire Bennett, founder, builder, advocate." I smiled at that. Not because of the title, but because someone had finally seen me not for what I used to be, but for what I had chosen to become. That evening, I stood by my office window, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. Buildings I had helped restore, venues I had funded, causes I had lifted from silence into visibility. It hadn't been an easy road. I'd built it through years of rejection, of invisibility, of being told I was too much or not enough. But I hadn't stopped. I'd worked through the assumptions, the polite dismissals, the constant underestimation. I hadn't fought for approval, I had just kept building. And in the end, that was what had made all the difference, not trying to change how they saw me, but refusing to let their limited vision define the scope of what I was becoming. My family hadn't changed overnight. They still stumbled over the language of support. My brother still asked awkward questions. My mother still hesitated before giving credit where it was due. But the difference was now I had terms, boundaries, leverage, and most importantly, peace. I no longer needed them to understand every detail of my work. I just needed them to understand that I was no longer waiting for permission. Respect wasn't something I would ask for anymore. It was something I walked in with. That was the real moral. Success isn't about proving yourself to people who refuse to see you. It's about building a life so rooted in purpose and integrity that their opinion no longer has the power to unmake you. Forgiveness, when it comes, is not about erasing the past. It's about rewriting your future on your own terms. As I sat back in my chair, a new proposal lighting up on my screen, I realized something else. The real power hadn't come from money or ownership or revenge. It had come from clarity, from knowing who I was, what I stood for, and why I had never really needed their validation in the first place. That was what had sustained me. That was what would carry me forward. Because at the end of the day, being underestimated was never the obstacle. It was the invitation to become something bigger, louder, smarter, and impossible to ignore.